Jeanne d'Arc was born, presumably in 1412, in the village of Domremy in northeastern France, to a family of prosperous peasants, Jacques d'Arc and Isabelle de Vauthin, nicknamed Romy, a name she received after once making a pilgrimage to Rome. Not far from the girl's house grew an old beech tree called the fairy tree, and when Joan was 13, voices of various saints began to speak to her from this tree, telling the girl about her destiny, to lift the siege of Orléans, to enthrone the French heir, and to expel the English invaders from the country. In France at that time, the 100 Years' War, which had begun in 1337, was ongoing and had already lasted for more than 80 years. The population of France was completely exhausted by the constant raids of the English army. People waited for a miracle and retold the prophecy of the wizard Merlin from the legend of King Arthur. A maid from Lorraine will come and save France. Joan, apparently, had also heard this legend and decided to act. In 1428, she went to Captain Robert de Baudricourt and asked him to inform the heir to the throne, Charles, that it was better not to fight before the following spring, because the voices had told her so. Joan was mocked and sent home, but the persistent girl did not give up and came to the captain several more times with the same request. Eventually, he agreed to send the girl to the heir and even provided her with men's clothing so as not to attract the attention of the soldiers. In early March 1429, Joan arrived at Charles's residence. He, having heard about the fortune teller, decided to test her. He placed another person on the throne, while he himself disguised himself and got lost in the crowd of courtiers. Joan effortlessly pointed to Charles and informed him that she had been sent by heaven to liberate the country from English rule. Charles was surprised not only by the predictions and her courage, but also by her horsemanship and perfect mastery of weapons. However, the heir hesitated and appointed two commissions. The first conducted an interrogation on the absence of connections with the devil, and the other confirmed Joan's virginity. The question of virginity was fundamental, since according to religious beliefs, only a maid could fulfill the mission of saving the country entrusted to her. In the Middle Ages, the cult of the militant Mother of God was popular in Europe. The maid was perceived as the patroness of warriors, leading them to victory. In parallel, Charles sent messengers to the girl's homeland, and only when it became clear that her reputation was spotless did the heir decide to appoint Joan commander-in-chief. The news that the troops were headed by a messenger of God caused an extraordinary moral uplift in the army environment. On April 29, 1429, Joan entered Orléans with a small detachment, and less than a month later, the English were forced to lift the siege of the city. This event became a key moment in the 100 Years' War, and Joan was thereafter nicknamed the Maid of Orléans. In June of the same year, the so-called bloodless campaign towards Reims began. City after city simply opened their gates to the French army, and on July 17th, in Reims Cathedral, in Joan's presence, the heir ascended the throne and became King Charles VII. This event caused a new surge of national spirit in the country. Joan urged Charles to launch an offensive on Paris, but the king hesitated. As a result, the French army advanced only in September. The battle was unsuccessful, and the girl herself was wounded by a crossbow. After the failed attempt to storm Paris, she was no longer allowed to command any significant forces. By April 1430, she had only managed to gather a detachment of volunteers, numbering no more than 500 people. She went to the city of Compiègne, which at that time was besieged by the Burgundians, representatives of the French party that had become an ally of the English during the 100 Years' War. On May 23rd, Joan launched an attack, but whether due to betrayal or some other reasons, the battle was lost, and she herself was captured by the Burgundians. Charles VII, upon learning of the girl's capture, did not lift a finger to save her. England very much wanted to get Joan in order to bring her before an ecclesiastical court, and as a result, for a large sum of money, she was handed over to the English. During the trial, it turned out that accusing the Maid of Orléans was not an easy task. She bravely answered questions, refuting all accusations of heresy. The court failed to obtain a confession from her, even under the threat of torture, so they decided to focus on the fact of wearing men's clothing and disregarding the authority of the church. During the trial, Joan swore that her hands were not stained with blood. She acted in the army only as a strategist and commander. Unfortunately, like many of her contemporaries, the girl was illiterate, and this played a sad role. Joan was read a paper and asked to sign it, unknowingly replacing it with another document in which she confessed her guilt. On May 30, 1431, for heresy, apostasy, and idolatry, the 20-year-old Joan of Arc was publicly burned at the stake in the Old Market Square in Rouen. 22 years later, the 100 Years' War ended, and soon Joan's mother acted as the plaintiff at the council for her daughter's rehabilitation. Charles VII ordered all documents to be collected. An investigation began, as a result of which the judges unanimously concluded that gross violations of the law had been committed during the trial of the girl. The judges read out the verdict, which stated that every point of accusation against the Maid of Orléans was refuted by witness testimony. She was fully acquitted. For Joan's achievements, Charles VII granted her family hereditary nobility and also exempted the entire village of Domremy, where she was born, from taxes, and the residents did not pay them until the Great French Revolution, which began in 1789. The biography of Joan of Arc is shrouded in many legends. So unusual and bright was her short life. Her opponents feared this girl like fire, and her comrades said that she fought and commanded the army as if she had been a captain who had spent 20 or 30 years at war. In fact, her military career lasted only a year. Joan loved her homeland to self-forgetfulness, was the embodiment of patriotism, a maid with a martyr's crown and a sword in her hand. In 1909, Pope Pius X declared Joan blessed, and on May 16, 1920, Pope Benedict XV canonized her. Today, almost every Catholic church in France has a statue of St. Joan of Arc in Orléans, in honor of the lifting of the siege on May 8, 1429. This day is still celebrated as the main holiday of the city, and on May 30th, France celebrates Joan of Arc Remembrance Day, the national heroine of the country. This girl absolutely did not fit into the framework created by society for women, and was a completely extraordinary figure, but she remained a humble Christian and sincerely believed that she was born for a single mission, to save France, and she fulfilled this mission to the fullest. This was the story of Joan of Arc. Subscribe so you don't miss new episodes of our short stories. Press the bell, write comments, like, be with us.